Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Khofane. I'm Khofane Mudise, and we are continuing this journey of celebrating women and looking at women leadership specifically in Botswana. And I'm joined by an incredible leader in Botswana right now, Tabuya. How are you?
I'm great, Hofa.
How have you been?
I've been fantastic.
And busy?
Very busy, always busy, but then always finding time to take a break, put in the relaxation, refresh a little bit whenever I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been traveling as well. Prior to our meetup, I couldn't get a hold of you. I mean, you were just everywhere. I was like, is she in the country? Is she not?
Yeah, no, traveling is part of the whole thing, but it has its beauty. I think it's beautiful to travel because then you get out of your normal comfort zone, but then at the same time it can be exhausting because you then lose your routines and things like that. So yeah, it all comes with the territory, but I think what's important is always finding a place to balance and relax whenever I can. So yeah, so I'm back in the country now, and I've been enjoying the heat that we have now. So yeah, so that's been beautiful to be back home.
Yeah. So could you please tell us your full name, your jurisdiction, which is obviously of high jurisdiction. You're an incredible woman, incredible leader. I mean, I remember going to your workplace and the work culture was absolutely incredible, so calming, so nice as well. And obviously we'll talk about work culture as well. So could you just briefly tell us who you are?
So I'm Tabuya, and it will be interesting to know what jurisdiction means.
Right.
I'm wondering what you mean by jurisdiction.
What's your role? What do you do, ma'am?
Oh, what do I do? Oh my goodness, I do so many things. But the role that my designation is Managing Director of Holland Life Botswana. And I do a whole lot of things. I mean, I make coffee and I talk to people and I look at finances and so it's a lot of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a beautiful role that I have.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your journey? Was insurance always part of the plan, or did you kind of go through a different trajectory for you to end up where you are now?
So interestingly, I've actually spent a longer time in terms of my career in banking. And I'm not sure whether that was deliberate, but I have a feeling it was because I do remember when I was sort of finishing off my studies, and particularly after I did my ACCA, which is accountancy training. So once I qualified, I just had a strong inclination for banking. And I'm not even sure where it came from, but nonetheless, I didn't go directly into banking. I did take a bit of a short stop in the telecoms industry, and then from there eventually got to banking. And that's where I then settled for a very long time. I think I was in banking for over a decade. And I really loved the industry. So my move to insurance maybe wasn't so much a specific thing around insurance at the time, but it was, within the financial services industry, I think is where I see a lot of work and potential to do really great work. But once I was in insurance, I think particularly life insurance, I just got like a very strong heart connection to that industry. I think more so because of just the kind of positive impact that the industry actually has on communities and on society. I mean, it just became just broader than just what we may consider to be business. And even that, I think sometimes I ask the question a lot. What do we mean by business anyway? Because at the end of the day, it's really about people. So so at the end of the day, the work is people work. So yeah. So coming into insurance wasn't a conscious thought around insurance, but I think I just remained within the sort of financial services, which I think I have, a strong passion for, and I ultimately landed and found my way to where my heart really is and how I connect so well with the life insurance industry.
Yeah, I think anyone will realize as we continue this conversation is how passionate you are about people and how the pivot from finance to telecoms now to insurance, where now life insurance, where now you're really about the people, you're really conversing with the people and in contact with them. Is this something that you became aware of post working in the insurance industry or during?
So I think more so during my time in insurance. So I think obviously some of the careers that we choose. I mean, I love finance. I love that it gives a really strong base for understanding and having a view of the entire business. I think that was really for me also a really good path for me to have followed to get to where I am. But I think also within finance, sometimes certain things are not as, you're not so aware of, so I think I didn't really have that much of an awareness at the time in terms of just how passionate I am about the work around people. So, at the time I was doing a lot of the numbers, and even though I always found softness within the numbers most of the time, it was just, what I brought to the role of finance. I'd always try to find a story within the numbers and so on. So yeah, so I think, now coming sort of having gotten out of finance, and even I think it was actually even during, but it was in a different role within finance that I just, began to really realize my passion for working with people. And I think it just really created a huge pivot in terms of how I view the work that we do within organizations, how I view leadership, and how I view any role. I think really it probably cuts across any role within an organization, is really ultimately just, really about people. But more so, I think as you become, you take on, leadership positions, that really is the core of the work. And very much, I mean, obviously there'll be other things you have to do, but that's really at the core of the work of being a leader.
Yeah, I love that, because I think it's a thing where I think John C. Maxwell says that if you're moving forward and you have no one following you, then you're not a leader at all. And I think it's so beautiful how you emphasize the people. And here we're not just talking about employees, but we're also talking about the clients as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think, even when and I love that you say that, because people, because we are all people, our clients are people. I think one of the things that, for me is always, important, and is always at my forefront, is to say, even just reducing the distance between people. So in other words, our employees, our customers, our societies, having zero distance between them. So if our customers can just be right there in there with us, and everybody else, we're working together to co-create something, then we know that we're doing the work. So indeed, I think the people, it's broader than just the people within the organization. It's all the people that we have the honor of actually either being able to serve, or being able to interact with, or being able to create solutions for. Those are the people that ultimately mean a lot to us.
Yeah, and being a leader in your own right, again, talking about the people, which I think for me, you got to me and you said we're in the business of people, and I said, yeah, that's it. Like, you nailed it.
Yeah.
And I think your leadership style is so unique in a sense of going out with the IT team. And I mean, you'll touch on that just now. And I thought when you told me about that, it's like, no, let's just have coffee, let's have breakfast together. And even when you're, checking new hires, you want to go out with them in a non-conventional setting. So I think it's a very unconventional style of leadership.
Yeah.
So can you just touch on that?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, and I think you touched on it when you said, being a leader is about having followers. If there's nobody following you, then you're not a leader. So, how do you consider yourself? And that's why I think even just designation sometimes can be very misleading, because for you to really be a leader, you've got to have people actually be there and want to actually lead you. To follow you, and for them to actually choose you as a leader. I think that is really the fundamental of it. So how then do you then lead people when you don't even know the people that you're leading? I think that's really the crux of it. And I know sometimes it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but I think at the core of it, if I'm able to do it, then that is the work that I'd rather do. Just get to actually understand, first of all, who the people that I'm working with are. And then from there, through those conversations, certain other perspectives come up. I always laugh. I'm like, my goodness, I'll meet different people and I'll be like, you've got like a whole 360 view of this business that I don't even have, So it also is enriching for me, because it's also, giving me perspective that I generally wouldn't have. And so even as I lead, I'm leading with depth in terms of understanding the core of what's actually going on, the core of what people are seeing, experiencing, and even when we start to think about, the kind of things the kinds of pains that people go through, it becomes a lot easier because it's relatable. So I think that for me is really the core of it. And without that, I think, it can be very lonely. And I think the loneliness of leadership is lonely when you don't actually make the time. I would sometimes laugh at times when I'd be like, I don't even understand how you could have leaders that would sit on some separate floor with security guards, and they're so protected from everything. But you're like, but what are you protected from? Because for you to actually then really lead, you've got to be with your people, not separate. And I think, the loneliness that I think, we would always hear of in terms of leadership being a very lonely place.
Lonely at the top.
Lonely at the top because you're alone and so on. Yes, I think, obviously by virtue of being in a particular position, there can already naturally be a little bit of a mental block where people are not, there's, a little bit of a distance. But I think for me, it's really about breaking that down and being able to really be able to be relatable and be able to connect with people. So I think that is what, for me, this work is about.
I love how you kind of took this corporate framework that we're kind of used to, and then you just dismantled it, and you're like, I don't want this. I don't like this. And this kind of takes us to this idea of, just not only just the idea, this concept of showing up as how you truly are versus what's expected of you, especially in corporate. And I'm going to maybe just take a jab and say, maybe even as a female leader yourself, and we'll talk about how you just felt like, I'm not really sure if I refer to myself as a female, I'm a leader, and that's it. But I mean, I just take us through maybe your mindset when you're like, I know this is what's expected of me, but as a leader who leads myself first to lead others, this is how I think would be best. And you obviously seeing results in the workplace now. Yeah.
Wow. So that's a big question because, I think for the most part, and for me as well, it has been something that I've had to also work through because one thing that seems very easy and should be easy, in fact, is actually showing up as your whole self. But I think sometimes it's the context in which we show up that sometimes, almost then calls into question whether there's a need to adapt ourselves in certain ways to be able to be effective within the context of where we are. So I think that is a big thing, So as much as it seems like the most natural, easiest thing to do, it tends to be a very difficult thing to do. I think even for, when I was reflecting on, what we consider to be the prototype of leadership, and particularly leadership at a particular position, right? There'll be some kind of a prototype that is there.
Yeah. Being stern and being
that's it, and then from there you'll hear these things about I think they call it executive presence and all of these things. And so all of a sudden you kind of running through this whole thing of, do I appear well? Do I dress well? Do I do this? And do I have gravitas? And, and all of these type of things sometimes do create a lot of strain because wherein the simplest thing that actually is the most natural thing is actually to show up as yourself and your whole self and bring your whole self, then becomes questionable because there's all these other reference points that you'll naturally start to make that may then call into question whether showing up in certain ways is good for for your career and your position or not, and I think that is a major consideration. But going back to your question around how do I navigate that, I think it's been a journey, and for me I've just found just the most refreshing approach to just really showing up. I don't also discard the fact that there are certain times where we do need to adapt to situations. I mean, that's just part of human nature. It's not even just a leadership thing. I mean, obviously, sometimes you walk into certain cultures or you walk into certain situations that call for a certain thing. But that is not the same as, walking away from yourself. It's just sometimes you've got to also be very aware of the situations that you're in, and therefore, which part of yourself you're actually bringing to the situation, and that, and being appropriate within that context. So I think that's obviously part of it. And I think adaptability in general is a big part of what we do as human beings, because we can't just go around just be yourself regardless of what it is, because sometimes certain things are just not appropriate for the situation.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of discernment, I think, that comes in as well. But I think definitely it's being having that freedom to actually be comfortable and have the courage to show up for who you really are also makes it easy for people to actually relate with that and be able to connect with that, because they don't then sense that aspect of a makeup that's going on. So I think ultimately in the end it ends up just working out beautifully when we look at leadership and authenticity, and just bringing your whole self to work. And it also allows for other people to also feel it comfortable to also bring their whole selves to work. So ultimately it then ends up creating the types of environments that I think we need as leaders. We need to be creating in our workplaces, where people can actually feel comfortable to be their whole selves, and they work in environments that are conducive and allow them to actually do the very best and come out and bring their unique gifts to the workplaces.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, to what degree does self-awareness contribute to showing up as who you truly are? Because in as much as you may be self-aware, you could still be a terrible person. I mean, it's like, how open are you to correction, especially when you're given a leadership position, or when you're a young leader yourself, or you've been in that position for a very long time. And because you've been in such a position for such a long time, you don't necessarily, you know what works and you know what doesn't work, so you don't necessarily need to change.
Yeah, so that's a tough one, but I think you're absolutely right. I think the first starting point is the awareness. And I think one of the other things that I've found in terms of tools that work really well is also being able to reflect, because it's very easy to walk through life and work and any other aspect really just on autopilot, and just kind of going through the motions. So that's quite key. And I think with a deeper sense of awareness, even just when it comes to accepting feedback and constructive feedback at that. I mean, obviously there will be, again, you've got to be discerning, because sometimes there's noise in the system. So you've got to be able to really be attuned to yourself, so that even where you receive feedback, you know what to do with it. Sometimes some of it is feedback, yes, take it in and that's okay. Some of it might actually lead you to actually get even a deeper sense of yourself, because you also get the gift of having other people give you their perspective in terms of how they also experience you, which for me is really a gift, because then with that you can only really get better. And I think as a person and as a leader, I think learning and personal development are always top of mind, in terms of always ensuring that you are also transforming as a person continually. So of course, the gifts that we get from the feedback we get is truly a gift, because again, a lot of the time you could sit in a situation where feedback doesn't come your way, which is also a very limiting thing, because then you don't get to grow.
You did mention also the first time we met about personal development, and you being so big on it, and I've heard the term before. And oftentimes, when you hear a buzzword, it's like the word sustainability, or these, and I think we'll talk about sustainability in insurance. I'm very curious about that as well. But personal development, what do we mean by that? I mean, it seems self-explanatory, but because there's so much inner work and self-awareness and feedback, and I guess things that kind of really sometimes shatter your ego, I can imagine how difficult of a process it may be. So what was your journey of personal development and your understanding of it as you enrolled in the school of personal development?
So I think first of all, it is internal work because ultimately, once we say once we talk about personal development, at least for me, in terms of what it means to me, it's work that is internal, and that means for the most part, again, it's difficult work because it does mean being able to look at yourself in the mirror, being able to see what do they call it? Sometimes they'll say warts and all. Yeah. Where you see the good, the bad, and the ugly at the same time, and being able to really look at that and be okay with that, and actually be accepting of that, because that is the starting point. But then after that, what then happens? What do you then do, just so that you ensure that in areas that you actually need to sometimes it's improving, sometimes it's not even improving, sometimes it's actually transforming, because you've got to then change certain things. But that requires a deep sense of commitment to yourself, which I think, there are a lot of resources. I tend to find that having other people that can actually help you down the journey is very important. For me, I love to have, coaches and mentors, and not in the formal senses also. At times, every experience that I have with people, when I'm either interacting with them, I'm learning something, and sometimes I'm learning something, and most of the time I'm learning something about myself. So I sometimes joke and I say, at times I will go through experiences where I recognize all of a sudden, oh, hang on, there's a muscle that actually I still need to develop. And it's through the experiences and being really, really aware, even as I'm experiencing certain things, that then allows me to then also then identify and pinpoint and be able to be aware of the areas that either I need to work on, and sometimes it can be the other way, where I'm like, oh, hang on, I didn't actually know I had this muscle. So I think it's just also being, very, very attuned to yourself as you navigate different things in your life. So for me, every experience always shows me something that I sometimes was not fully aware of about myself, but then at least now, with that sense of awareness, I'm able to then work with that, and to have other people that also obviously act as my go-to people, that either are obviously a part of my journey in terms of getting myself developed in different ways.
And I love how just earlier you talked about reflection as well, and how on your way here we were talking. One of the questions I was going to ask you is just about is there a distinct difference between men and women, or female male leadership in Botswana? And you mentioned how it's not something that you had noticed, and I was like, actually, this is a theme that I've been kind of getting all over, which is Botswana so progressive that there hasn't been a real distinct difference between females and male leaders? Or is it just that because of our culture in Botswana, it's just a culture of respect, and this is how you relate with one another? Obviously, there may be special instances where one is obviously feeling like, okay, this man is just being a bit too much, or maybe this is the situation. So I'm wondering, do we have Western influences that kind of alter the way in which we see leadership? Or as Botswana, within our region, ourselves, we kind of have a way of doing things, and it's been working just fine?
So I think as Botswana specifically, I do think that there has been quite a movement in the past years where I think female leadership has risen in terms of just that progress. So I think, yes, there's definitely that aspect in terms of, whether it was a conscious thing, but you can see that more and more there are, more and more female leaders that are coming up in our environment. So when it comes to the distinctions, I think what I also, I think, noticed with leadership, particularly female leaders, and within the context, again, of organizations, is that at times there is that strong inclination for the male styles of leadership, if that even exists. to be the styles that are prevalent within whether female or male, right? But I think what I didn't really notice very much was that there could be a major issue with women getting into leadership positions. I think maybe because we are seeing that shift, whether it's enough or not, I think is the question. I think there's still more that can still be done. And also I think as female leaders, as you highlighted, there are certain situations that can make it very apparent that someone is a woman and that someone is a man. Whether those are prevalent and maybe play out in a very negative manner, I'm not too sure. But I do think that there are those moments that for me personally, I can sometimes feel like, sure, okay, I'm the only woman here. Right. It can be it's something that I recognize sometimes, because in certain contexts, I will find, yes, I am the only woman in a particular setting, or maybe there's fewer women in a particular setting. So I think still, a little bit of work probably to be done in those situations, particularly because when you look at banking and insurance sectors particularly, there are a lot of, the workforce is predominantly female.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at the leadership, you might find that the thing, it changes.
Yeah.
Now you've got a bigger representation of male leaders than female leaders. But I do think that there has been a lot of shift in that area. And I think that there will continue to be a shift in that area, which will now start to see us have, a bit of a more, what is it?
Balance
of sorts, if that is even what we're looking for, but a balance of sorts where we can see the representation of the bigger workforce being also represented in the leadership. So I think that is something that I have noticed, but I do think as a country we have made major strides, major strides.
Absolutely. And I think as we continue this conversation of gender equality and so on, I think we can't talk about without talking about diversity and inclusion as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think for me, when I think about diversity, they say diversity is a fact. But inclusion is more of a choice that we make.
Right? Say that again.
So diversity is a fact, but we choose to be inclusive. So just by, I think, accepting and opening ourselves out to, including everybody who's diverse, because one thing that we know for a fact is that we are diverse. And nowadays, well, maybe not even nowadays, I think it's always been the case, because our diversity comes in very many different forms. It can be diversity in terms of thought, it could be diversity in terms of gender, it could be diversity in terms of age, so that the diversity is broad. So all of these, just knowing and accepting that we are diverse is the starting point. Then what do we do with that? What do we then do now that we know that we are diverse? Then comes in the choices to say, then therein we then choose to be inclusive in terms of including all the diversity that we have and being inclusive, because the other choice could be to exclude and be exclusive in terms of whether it's whichever areas where we don't feel comfortable, and then we would like to exclude those. So I think for us, more so, I think now in leadership, it's really about having that openness to actually then choose to be inclusive. And I think maybe it's not even just a leadership phenomena. I think it's just a human thing, within organizations, within societies, where we can actually choose to be inclusive and to do that, because it is ultimately, otherwise to exclude others just means that we're taking a different kind of a choice, So I think wow. Inclusion is a major topic. I think that I think it just really, I think for me, just starting just the knowledge that we are diverse and what do we do with that? How do we respond to it at an individual level? Are there times when we find ourselves, whether knowingly or otherwise, having a certain inclination to exclude others, or to have a view of others that could lead to them being excluded?
That's so beautifully articulated. That was very beautiful. And I think I'm listening to you now, and I'm wondering, and I'm also thinking about the effort that is required from grassroots level to, leadership level to understand the diversity that comes within the organization, or that you can include from age. I'm sure there are organizations that want a very youthful organization, which is understandable when you want to be progressive. But also when you have people that have been there for long, they also have a certain way of understanding the business of things. But then again, the downside being, how do you kind of incorporate these different age groups? And I think that one is the first question that I have to ask under this point of, being diverse. And then second being the different mindsets as well. And these, how things have been done, how things could be done, and then how things are being done now. So how do you kind of incorporate all these ideas and all these concepts and say, okay, this is what I'm saying now.
So I think, again, it goes back to context in terms of sometimes, yes, there is, a business is where it is, and maybe there are certain things that are required to move the business forward. As you've said, a lot of it, sometimes we get to a certain place where we do need a certain representation, or we need to be a certain way as a business for us to continue to be relevant, within the context of our customers, and particularly, within the context of those that we serve. So sometimes there will be those considerations. But I think by being inclusive, not necessarily to say that you're going to make choices that will not be make sense for the business, if I may call it that, right? So within that comes, again, another set of choices. If you're wanting to move say from one place to another, right? What does that then look like? What do you then need as a business to be able to do that? And at times it could be that you do need to shift the makeup of the workforce and so on. And those are some of the things that, and sometimes it might even be that you need certain skills that will move you from here to there, right? Which means now, you've got to do that. But I think within that comes in the considerations around then how do you navigate that? Because I always feel at times there can be hard choices that also need to be made, and that's okay. Sometimes it could be that there are certain choices that may mean, you've got to make certain shifts within the business, but it's in the how you actually do it. It was interesting the other day. I was attending something in Cape Town, and the conversation was around transformation, right? And particularly around the topics of upskilling, and so on. And I thought that was actually quite interesting, because what some of the thinking is now is to say, even where you've got certain skills that, for instance, you will still need, but you don't need them in-house in the business, but they can still be provided to you from the outside of the business, that, people are then outskilled, can then provide their services, still provide services to the business, but from a different context, right? So I think it's just in the how, and I think for the most part, and sometimes it could be issues of saying, well, we've got to upskill, and sometimes it could be that those that possess the skills you need sit within a certain demographic, just as an example. So those are some of the choices, and I think that's the beauty and the and the of certain things within businesses. Sometimes some of the choices need to be made, but I think it's just in the how we actually execute on some of these choices, because ultimately it then has to be, for looking at the bigger picture in terms of what we're trying to do and how we actually go about doing it.
Yeah. And then how were you able to distinguish between being a manager of people versus leading people?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think so I think managing, so I think first of all, you need both the skills, right? Because I think, ultimately there is the management of what needs to happen, right? Which is one aspect. But then leading, I think, is more around being able to firstly create the enabling environments for people to actually do the work that they are supposed to actually come in and do, right? And a lot of it, I know sometimes, we'll talk about, inspiring and sort of giving the meaning and the purpose and kind of connecting things for people so that they can see what their contributions are, and also that what they do is actually meaningful. So all of that, I think, would sit within the ambit of leadership, because ultimately, if you are, I mean, you definitely cannot manage, well, okay, you could, but I think it'll obviously be very limited if you're going to manage, but you actually aren't leading. So I think it's really about more around unlocking people's gifts and talents. That's what leadership really does, is that it actually unlocks that, so that people actually are the ones that bring themselves up and do and become, even better for it. And leadership then is about being able to bring people up to where they need to be, and being able to see what is possible that maybe they're not able to necessarily see for themselves. So that's where I think the distinction is. But I think for the most part, you'd find that both those skills coexist, and they need to be working with each other.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's so beautiful. Okay. I even forgot the question I was going to ask. I know. And I think it's so interesting how you just earlier, when you talk about when you were in Cape Town, you mentioned transformation. And then the question therein is, okay, transformation in the insurance industry, what? But that's also a buzzword that we've been kind of hearing. And I think that, and I've wondered rather, that when it comes to buzzwords like transformation or even sustainability, like I mentioned earlier, and then you look at your industry, is it words that are often used, and I think without any real affirmative action, where you're just like, okay, we're saying this and we're having broad conversations about it, but where's the actual action? Where do we serve the people? Is that oftentimes a question that you may ask yourself, and then you want to action it to say, we've said this, but like, where's the action, and when are we going to serve the people with this particular conversations we've been having?
Yeah, so it is a tricky one, because there are lots of buzzwords, and a lot of it, I think, when you really look into it, you realize that there is good intention. So I think the action, you're absolutely right. I think it's really making it very crystal clear what we mean within context, and what we mean, and how we will actually then actualize it, right? And making it, really, really simple in that way. So for me, yes, it's probably, themes that speak to, more than anything else, maybe a call to action for some kind of deeper change. I think that's what really, both the terms you used, transformation and sustainability, is really a call to action, because it's I think an acknowledgement that where we were and where we have been is probably not where we want to be, and therefore, what does that look like? And it'll look different, I think, for different industries, for different companies, depending on where they are. Just all that context around that becomes quite important. So sometimes I think what then unfortunately happens with some of these buzzwords is there could be an inclination to have specific things that one company is doing, and then another company wants to do exactly the same thing, just because it seems like that is the the right thing that's being done, or it looks like, by ticking a box we can then say we are doing. But I think it's, for the most part, both especially around even the sustainability and transformation, it has to really be embedded. So it has to be how we actually live and do things. And it doesn't have to be necessarily anything that is separate from anything, where we've got like a whole separate thing that says, well, actually we're going to be sustainable, so therefore we've got this other thing going on the side. If it has to be embedded within, the core decisions that you make within the organization, the way in which you do things, the type of choices that you make, they then that's how you actually ensure that actually it's actually being lived out in that way. So I think for me that's in a bit of a broader sense. That's what for me is, it actually means. And for that to then happen, as organizations, we need to dig deep into ourselves and say, what does it actually mean for us? And what resonates for us, and how do we then live this? And once we're able to do that, then it doesn't have to be the same as another company. So when you're asking about insurance, I think the business that we are in terms of life insurance, is already just so transformational in terms of the solutions that we actually offer to people, for them to actually then, almost provide some level of security for something that is an inevitable event, right? But more than anything else, I think it's also about being able to provide solutions for people wherein we can actually shift the narrative around what wealth generation looks like, what it looks like for generations to move from, periods of say, poverty to something else. Because I think one of the things that we grapple with is, we will grapple as a society and as a community with issues around poverty and the type of financial strains that we actually experience as human beings within the context of Botswana can be really, really incredible in terms of just how major they are. And that has, almost the effect of eroding but even just our nation and our society. So I think, from a solution perspective in terms of life insurance, we already in that way are providing type of solutions that are impactful, that do contribute to what we may consider as sustainability. But more than anything else, I think when I think sustainability, I'm also thinking and linking it with impact in terms of how do we actually make sure that what we do as a business actually has that positive impact. And for me, I think for this industry, we're already well placed. I think it's just taking that and moving it to the next level, where we are able to actually do more around, being a lot more deliberate around where it is that we are actually, which needs we're actually going to make sure that are filled, and also make sure that the people that actually need the most of what we offer actually have got access to it. So I think that's where now our business, for in already what it is, becomes a topic of sustainability and impact, without necessarily vying away from the core of what we do.
Oh wow. Okay. That was actually very brilliant. For a question that I just asked you now that you weren't prepared for.
I'm not prepared for any of your questions, but
it's true. It's absolutely true. And when you reflect now on who you are as a leader, do you think that you are becoming or are the leader that you've always wanted to be led by?
I'm still a work in progress. I'm always a work in progress. So I wouldn't say I am. I don't even think there's a destination. So I wouldn't say I am there. But I think what I do have is a commitment to grow as a leader and to see leadership as a continual process of growing into. I think also for me, I've also had the privilege of working with so many different types of people, so many different types of leaders, which obviously contributes quite significantly to maybe the leader that I am today. So I definitely can't take that away. I think, I've seen, just as in with anything, we kind of look at things and say, we'll have a coexistence of different things. So we'll have, the positive together with the negative. They have to be together, right? So I think the aim not being to be the ultimate in terms of a perfect leader, but I think it is really about, actually just embracing the idea that it's actually, there will be both things that will sit within ourselves in terms of some of the negatives, some of the positives, but also I think the desire to actually grow and be better for it, and to continually see yourself as a work in progress, I think is very, very important, because then you're never static and you're never really stuck. It's always a case of accepting that it's really just a beautiful journey of growing within the context of leadership. So there is no destination, and there never will be a destination.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just a long journey.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And then, and in closing, my question then to you is, what would you then say now is your leadership philosophy?
Philosophy?
Oh.
Okay, that's a very
And it's a bit abstract of a term, isn't it?
It is,
Like, okay, what's my philosophy? Do I say that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a tough one. I think really for me, I've always had this, which is leaving people and places better than I found them. I think it's not even just, and maybe it is, because it's about, leadership again is not just about, within the context of corporate, right? So I loved how you put it in the beginning around, leading yourself and then leading others, right? And because we are whole, we've got different facets to us. We're not just Tabuya at Holland. We've got Tabuya the mother. We've got Tabuya the sister, the daughter, and so on. So we've got the friend. So we've got Tabuya in so many different contexts. But I think the one that really, really stays with me always is if I can leverage on always ensuring that I'm leaving people and places better than I found them, then the content of that can look different, but that becomes the core of what then allows me to make the choices that I'm making on a daily basis.
Wow, and I can assure you, you have left me emotionally and mentally in a better place than I was before we met. Yeah. It's so beautiful, and I think also our audience would appreciate that as well, and how your kindred spirit and how incredible you are as an individual. And I think it just oozes who you are. And I appreciate you so deeply for taking time to have this conversation and being so honest. You can compliment you, it's okay. You can compliment me, it's my turn. I don't know, I'm kidding.
I was actually going to, because when we started, I did share with you that I felt very uncomfortable about doing this. So I would like to thank you for making it, for taking me out of my comfort zone. I think that's important. But I think it was also for me just having this opportunity to not only speak to you, Hofa, but also speak to hopefully hundreds and thousands of other people who otherwise I would not have the opportunity to speak to. So I really think that this work that you do in terms of really having these conversations gives us access to so many different perspectives, so many different views, and so many different people that generally, we wouldn't necessarily have that opportunity to have a one-on-one with. So thank you very much, and thank you for taking me out of my comfort zone. As I said, it's never easy to be in front of cameras and lights and all these things, and have to have a conversation, but you made it very easy and it's been such a flow, and I enjoyed this a lot.
I appreciate it so much, and I know this won't be the last. And to your audience, thank you as well for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and we'll see you next time.